Hello there and welcome to Passcode Global Consultants. Again, we are here to do IELTS Speaking Part 2. We are going to give you tips which are very important to enable you to pass the IELTS Part 2 exam. And maybe before we start, I need to mention that IELTS exam has 3 parts. That is part 1, part 2, and part 3. And for the sake of this presentation, we are going to look at part 2 in details and expound on what is needed for this part. So generally, when we talk about IELTS part 2, this is a cue card part whereby you go into the examiner's room. And when you get to this part, the examiner will be giving you a cue card with questions, or a question with a breakdown of items which you are going to discuss. And majorly it's you who does the topic. When you are doing a video call exam, that means you're not doing a one-on-one exam in the same room. You will have the exam projected on the screen, and that is where you will check your question, and then you will proceed to answer the question. So this part takes about 3 to 4 minutes, and it is the individual's long turn talking. So individuals long turn talking, we are saying that this part is individuals long turn talking because it is you who is going to do much of the talking. Actually, in this part, it is like it's like a monologue, because the moment the examiner gives you the questions and tells you that the card with the questions and tells you that now you can go ahead and prepare, there's silence because you just prepare and the examiner is not talking at that moment. They are just waiting for you to prepare. And then after you have prepared, they will allow you to talk. That is after your 1 minute is over. And then you are going to talk. So generally what happens in this part is that the examiner gives you a card with the questions, gives you 1 minute to prepare, and then after 1 minute they give you 1 to 2 minutes to speak. So you will talk about one topic, and the topic will be given to you on the card. This is just an example of a topic. We are going to look at it in details. And then that topic is broken down into sub-points. And mostly the sub-points here are the WH questions, the what, who, where, when, how, why. Such kind of questions are the ones that you'll be answering regarding the topic. So you need to talk about that topic in details, because you can see that you are given 1 to 2 minutes to talk, and that is a lot of time where you can say a lot of things. But now what IELTS requires is that you need to organize your speaking very well, so that you can say the most important things about the topic you have been given within the time that has been allocated to you. So it is very, very important to make sure that you utilize your time wisely, so that your 2 minutes do not end and then the examiner cuts you short before you say the important points. You will have the topic broken down into bullet points, and therefore you have to organize your answer according to the bullet points as you are going to see in the example. And you have to ensure no or just little hesitation. If hesitation has to be there, it has to be minimized, because when you hesitate, you tend to repeat yourself. So hesitation plus repetition denies your marks, because they interfere with your logical flow of ideas. So it is very important to remain with a good flow, so that you do not then lose marks because of that. Now let us look at an example, because this is what is going to help us understand this part better. So you are in the exam, you do part 1, and if you want to see what happens in part 1, you can view our video for part 1. We have done a video for part 1 speaking. So after you are through with part 1, the examiner now signals to you that you are going to part 2, and they will just say, that's the end of part 1, now let's go to part 2. And then in part 2, they will tell you, I'm going to give you a topic. So they will give you a card, and you will not open that card until they ask you to open it, that is to turn it over on the side that is written, because they are going to pass the card to you. So once you turn the card, you're going to see this kind of a question. Let's read the question. The question says, describe an interesting discussion you had as part of your work or studies. You should say what the subject of the discussion was, who you discussed the subject with, what opinions were expressed, and explain why you found the discussion interesting. So these are some part of the instructions that the examiner is going to give to you, that you will have to talk about the topic for 1 to 2 minutes. You will have 1 minute to think about what you are going to say, and you can make notes to help you if you wish. So making notes is not compulsory. That is, if you wish to make notes, you make notes. Now, let's try to understand this question and break it down and digest it so that we can try to answer it. So the question says, describe an interesting discussion. So this is a keyword, interesting discussion, you had as part of your work or studies. So we have, it can be based, the discussion can be based on work or it can be based on studies. So the word or here shows that it is an option. You don't have to talk about work and studies at the same time. You can either choose to talk about work or studies and then you talk about an interesting discussion. So what should you say about that discussion? What the subject was. So you need to think about something on work or studies and then make that part of your discussion. And then the second bullet point is on who you discussed with. Say it's about studies, maybe you discussed with your thesis supervisor, your lecturer, your teacher. If it's your work, maybe you discussed with a work colleague, your junior at work, your senior at work, your supervisor at work, your boss, and such. What opinions were expressed? Now, those ones you narrow down according to the topic that you have chosen, and explain why you found the discussion interesting. Of course, this is a why question. So let's look at an example of how this question was answered, and I'm going to be reading. You can see that this question is broken down into 4 main points, and when you look at the question has 1, 2, 3, 4 points. So this is a good way of how to organize your answer. And remember, you're not going to make this kind of points. This is just a sample answer because you don't have time to make this kind of points. But when you are explaining, you need to explain in paragraphs like the way this answer is crafted. So when you are making notes, you will just make very simple notes that will enable you to answer the question comprehensively. So on the first one, let's look at the answer. I want to talk about an interesting discussion I had with my mentor about my studies. Full stop. I was then a young boy in high school. So this statement already tells us that this person has chosen to talk about a discussion they had with their mentor in school. So they have chosen studies, and they have told us already whom they had a discussion with, and that is their mentor in high school. While I was in second year of my studies, my teacher mentor expressed a concerns that I had not made a clear decision about my career. We arranged for an ample time over the weekend to have the talk. We discussed my talents, passions, and interests, and I told her about my never-ending desire to become a lawyer. However, she expressed her observation of my strong skills in sciences and the ability to grasp concepts easily. She felt I should venture in sciences or technology. We agreed I select a science-related career that aligned with my skills. I found the discussion very interesting because I had earlier not realized my skills and abilities in sciences. It was thrilling to have someone else discover my skills, a discovery that formed the foundation of my career. Excellent answer. So if you look at that answer, you can see that all the questions are answered. What the subject of the discussion was. It was about career. That is coming out very clearly in the discussion, in the answer. And the other question on who you discussed the subject with, that was also clear. The candidate here talked about the mentor. And then the other question is what opinions were expressed. The opinions are listed here. What the student thought he or she should study. And then what the teacher thought. So you can see there are opinions of this candidate and also opinions of their teacher mentor. The last question was on why you found the discussion interesting, and it is also very well expressed here. I found the discussion interesting because. So you answer the question of why with the word because. So this is an excellent answer, very well crafted, arranged in paragraphs. Of course, you will not be writing, but the way you will be speaking will be showing or telling your examiner that now you are moving from one point to another. So this kind of arrangement is very important. So suppose you're making short notes. So on this one, you could have talked about mentor. And when you just look at the word mentor, you will remember that you want to talk about the discussion you had with your mentor about your careers. So when you're making short notes, you just write short notes so that when you start speaking for this part, you will not be concentrated so much on your notes at the expense of maintaining eye contact with your examiner. You have to maintain eye contact with your examiner. That is why it is very important that you don't make a lot of notes, you just make short notes. Now let's look at tips for part 2 speaking, because these are very important to help us to pass this exam. And the first one is that you need to make good use of the preparation time. This is the part of IELTS where you are given time to prepare. Remember, in all the other parts of IELTS, you are not given time to prepare for any question. The examiner will be asking you a question and you will be answering the question directly. There will be no time to prepare. So for this one, since you're given time to prepare, you need to make good use of that time so that you can come up with the best answer. And one thing I like telling students is that since you do not have enough time to prepare for questions in part 1, and that is the beginning of your exam, you may find that you're making mistakes out of lack of confidence. Then when you get to part 2, you need to take advantage of the preparation time to ensure that you give a very concrete, very comprehensive answer to garner all the marks. So the given question breakdown is what should guide you so that you can arrange your answers like the way you saw them arranged here, and that will work to your advantage. Now you need to manage your time well, and this you will achieve through practice, because as you can see, we have for you 1 minute to prepare and 1 to 2 minutes to present. So when you practice doing that, you will be able to achieve the same in the exam. So the next point is that you need to answer everything that's given on the card. So it is very, very critical that you don't ignore any question on the card. The breakdown, you need to take note of the breakdown, the what, the who, the what again, and why. These are 4 questions which are very important. And remember, the first part, you need to introduce the subject, talk about who you discussed with, what opinions were expressed by both parties, and then why the discussion was interesting. So that is really very, very important. You should not go out of topic, of course. That is like obvious. And hesitation, repetition, you have to avoid that if you have to garner all the marks. Now, what about when you make mistakes? When you make mistakes, you can self-correct yourself. When you realize you've made a mistake and you are continuing with your discussion, you can self-correct. But you need to limit those mistakes if you have to get all the marks, and of course that is what everyone wants. You can allocate time to the given items. Say if you have 4 items and you are purposing to speak for 2 minutes, you can have 30 seconds per item. However, you need to look at your items and know which item may need more time, so that you can allocate more time to that particular item. So in some instances, because questions also differ, you may not have the same amount of time for all the items. You need to speak for more than 1 minute. Remember, you are given 1 to 2 minutes to speak. So your conversation should not be less than 1 minute, because it will be very short and you will not garner enough marks to get a good band score. So you need to give your answer in very simple English, and that is what I have always emphasized for IELTS. You don't need to use complicated English, because you might have a tendency of using words that are not very familiar to you. In some instances, maybe not very familiar to the examiner, and what you want to mean may be distorted. So it is very important to keep on using very simple English. So that's the end of this conversation. Remember, this video has been brought to you courtesy of Passcode Global Consultants. We do teach IELTS. If you need any assistance, please do not fail to contact us, and we will be ready to assist you. Until we meet in the next video, I want to wish you the very best. Goodbye.